cult classic, action movies, shows, and the artists who helped make them. This is Action Gems.
And welcome everyone, this is Matt.
And I'm Richie.
And we are Action Gems, where we find them and you watch them. This week, we are talking, yet again, to Jeff Meek. Well, of course, yet again, I messed this up.
Hey, I'm talking to him.
Yeah.
I don't know where you were.
This is like a pilot of a TV show where you have parts of the things there, but one part of the cast is just not there. And then later on, you're like, oh, that's like the main show.
I see now.
It's like when you watch like King of the Hill or The Simpsons or South Park at the early on, and like the animation's terrible, and then like
all the voices are different and weird. And
then like you're around like season 3 to 5, like it's always that point. You're like, that's where the show is. I remember, not like that early stuff.
So stick around for 2 more years, and we'll find our footing.
Yeah, and with that, here's Jeff Meek.
Do you know the voice for Batman?
On the Batman animated series, Kevin Conroy.
Yeah, I worked with Kevin. Kevin and I did Search for Tomorrow together when I first got my first job in New York.
Get out of here.
Yeah, he was my rival on the show.
Wow.
Yeah, and Kevin's made a fortune on that show, man. I mean,
and a little bit on Batman animated series. I
sure.
Guess. That's awesome, though.
Yeah, Kevin's got a beautiful speaking voice. Very rich.
It's
30 year.
It
is. It's a Shao Kahn. After a while, you can kind of, it takes about 45 minutes for me to get it into Shao Kahn. And that's how it worked. And so I just kept, so it'd take me about 45 minutes to actually just get my voice into the octave that I needed to play Shao Kahn. Because Raiden was up here, Yeah. Raiden's just kind of like, I'm just having a good time. But when I was playing Shao Kahn, I can't even do it now. It's just, I was pliable enough to actually drop it down another octave or so. And, it takes a while to get that resonance.
Yeah, I mean, what was I going to say? I think I can see now how maybe you were channeling your inner Kevin Conroy for Shao Kahn.
Yeah, Kevin was cool. He was a very nice man, too. I liked him very much. But he was only on the show when I was in New York, I was only on the show for about a year before he left. And then he did I think he started doing the Batman thing right after that. And he started doing that in the 80s, right?
So that show premiered in 92.
92.
And well, what's awesome is, so even though that particular iteration had ended in 95, he came back pretty much right away, like in 97, because they had the new Batman Adventures. So basically, I think what happened was WB and WB wanted to do something that was a bit more kid-friendly than what animated series was, because I mean, it wasn't like the super dark show, but it wasn't like upbeat, like more upbeat, like New Adventures was. And so, yeah, like basically he stuck with that character for.
Do you know I tested for the original Batman movie,
1989 Batman.
Yeah.
Good Lord.
With me and I was in a room with Tim Burton and Marion Doherty. And I came in with The Dark Knight. I came in with that character. And he was doing Beetlejuice. He just got done doing Beetlejuice. So he's a big thing at Universal, right? And so I came in with this, because my character that I brought in was anybody that puts on a uniform, a mask and everything and starts killing for vengeance is a sick puppy. And so that's who I brought into the audition. He was sick. He was laying on the couch. He had a cold, Tim Burton. And so he was laying on the couch watching me do my audition. And then he got up. He had a phone call. He went in the other room. And I could hear that he was on the phone. He was talking to Jack Nicholson. And he, I guess in some way he was, I don't know if he was making a deal with him or talking and negotiating a deal or, what he wanted from him. I don't know. But it was a conversation. But Marion Doherty, I don't know if you know who she is. She was like
No.
the prima of casting directors in Hollywood back in the day. You know, old school, when casting people actually had power. You know,
Oh.
she did. She was Universal's main lady, and she had brought me in, and I brought this nasty character in. And so when I played Batman, when I was playing Bruce Wayne, I was just Jeff. But when I was playing Batman, I was playing Shao Kahn. And so it had ended up translating when I was playing Shao Kahn, that was my version of Batman.
What? Damn. Okay, I'm starting to picture what you were doing in Conquest and trying to place that in scenes where like.
But that was my Dark Knight. But they hadn't written anything like that because Batman was da na 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 pow. It was all that '60s, you know, that stupid television series in the '60s.
I love that show.
Yeah, I did too. I watched it as a kid, but it was a totally different thing than what Chris Nolan was doing with it, right?
Oh,
I mean, come on.
Dark night and day.
That's right. And so, but I had brought in that character when I first said he wasn't ready for it.
Wait, so
that's when he hired Michael Keaton because he had just done Beetlejuice.
So did you know that they were going to do a darker take?
No.
When you went in?
No. That was my take. And I'm not saying I had any influence on it, but that was my take of that character. Because I loved Batman as a kid.
Yeah.
But I had lots of dark shit going on when I was a kid. All my friends got blown up when I was a kid. And my brother was killed in a car accident. I had a lot of tragedy when I was a kid. And so I had this, I related to Batman so much that but my Batman was a vengeful Batman. And so he was the dark frickin' knight. And so it kind of freaked out Tim, you know, it just sort of went, well, that's an interesting take. That's a little much.
That's what he said?
No, he didn't say it, but I could feel it, right?
Yeah.
And he had not written that. He had written, you know, the thing with Keaton, which was kind of fluffy, you know, it was a fluffy take. It was sort of on the heels of Tim Burton style stuff, which is, you know, Edward Scissorhands, and you know, it's fluffy. It's not shadowy like, you know,
like Batman Begins.
Thank you.
Yeah.
But I was doing that kind of that was my take on it.
Wow.
Marion loved it. You know, God rest her soul. She loved what I was doing. That's why she brought me in.
So I've talked to a few different actors, and they all say the same thing in regards to, well, and some of my former coaches had said the same thing, and I'm sure you've experienced exactly the same thing, is that auditioning is basically its own thing aside from filming, in that, you know, the creative process is completely different, and the rewards can be completely different from filming, aside from the obvious of getting the part. You know, you can come in there and, you know, have this wildly different take, and then people can remember you for what you did, even though it didn't make it into the final movie.
Right.
So when you were auditioning for Shao Kahn or Raiden for Conquest, did you have other takes that you presented?
No.
And then, so basically you gave them your audition, and then they're like,
yeah, I just thought that Raiden was, you know, he was sort of like a partier. That's
the vibe I got. Like when he'd show up,
he's just like, relax, you know.
Yeah.
You guys are so wound up.
I love that he just pops in at random times when they're going through their shit.
Right, exactly. I loved it.
And then
I get to come in, tell the jokes, and leave. It was brilliant. It was a great gig, man. I loved it. I had a ball, and I just had so much fun with everybody. So what's really interesting, though, is that every time I walked on the set as Raiden, everybody wanted to talk to Raiden. As soon as I came out as Shao Kahn, they would avoid me like the plague. No one would get within 30 feet of me as Shao Kahn.
Shit.
It was bizarre.
Wow.
And so I got integrated in terms of my psyche, man, because I was playing the darkest dude in the world, and I was playing the lightest dude in the world. And so it was fun dynamic, but it was, you know, I got really integrated. It was really cool.
That's so
Yeah.
basically, and then like between setups, you would just go back to Jeff, or would you stay in character for a while as
Oh,
one?
I'd stay in character. As Shao Kahn, forget it. If you talk to me, I'd tear your head off.
Yeah.
And if I was playing Raiden, I was your best buddy. And so I wanted to have the mystique of that a little bit, you know, and also it because you're shooting so furiously too, is that, you know, it behooved you to stay in character.
I mean that makes sense. Yeah,
Yeah,
you don't want to have to,
it wasn't like a movie; it was a television series, so they were shooting furiously. You know,
yeah.
you got to do an
You-
episode of an hour episode in 6 days. You know, that's a lot of setups, man.
So you do like you'd film 6 days, have one day off.
I think if I recall, I think it was 2 days off, but then we'd take 5 days, and then we take 2 days off, and then we'd finish that episode on the next day, if I recall. I don't really remember, but I think it was a 6 or 7 day shoot for
Wow.
each episode. But
Well,
we
it
never
was
did table readings or anything like that. We just had new people come in, and you meet them on the set. So, you know, you'd meet, you know, Eva Mendes came on, and I saw her in costume for the first time, and I went, wow, this show's great.
it's interesting to see people like her or like I said earlier, Jamie Presley.
Jane Presley
Just
was so cool. She and I really hit it off. I love her. She's
she
awesome. She's awesome. We'd go out to dinner at, you know, the California Grill, and yeah, after the show, everyone, because you're in Florida, there's nothing else to do.
yeah.
You know, you're away from home, and so we'd all get together as the cast, and we all go out to dinner together.
So
It was such a party. It was such fun.
and
And
you
so I
got
get to
to
meet great performers like Eva and Presley and all these magnificent, talented, beautiful people. And they'd come in
Daniel.
and just hang out with us for, you know, a week. It was so cool.
It definitely sounds like a workcation.
Right? It was marvelous. I died and went to heaven, man. And it was in Orlando, Florida.
Daniel Bernhardt definitely stands out in the show in the fight scenes especially. I love that, like we were talking about earlier with making sure that an actor making sure that you know it's him when he's in the fight scene. And I love seeing him whenever he shows up in fight scenes because they do, you know, basically the mark of validity where it's a wide shot and you see his face and he's doing a spin kick.
Well, he was really, I think, probably the most accomplished martial artist that was in the main cast. Most everybody else was actors first, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But Raiden and Shao Kahn didn't get a chance to fight much. You know, if you know, I didn't fight, but maybe a couple of times.
Raiden and Shao Kahn didn't get to fight much except with each other.
With each other. I choreographed that too, by the way.
So you pulling triple duty?
Yeah, I asked him if I could.
Oh.
I said, I'm fighting myself. Is it all right if I have something to say about it? And so I got together with the stunt coordinator and we worked it out together. But I had, you know, I framed it.
Yeah.
We had a lot of other stuff that was attached to that too. I had a lot of wire work and everything that made the cut, didn't make the cut. But it was a much more elaborate fight than when it ended up on the screen.
Yeah.
But it was fun, you know. And so my stunt coordinator would put on my costume. And I was playing Shao Kahn. I'd put on Shao Kahn's costume, and he'd put on Raiden's. And then when we turned the camera around, I'd put on Raiden's costume, and he'd put on Shao Kahn's.
That sounds like so much fun.
It was a gas. It was just a gas, and it took us 3 days to shoot it.
Yeah.
It was a lot because it was in a big sort of open space, you know. But you know, but that was this is what I thought that the next couple of seasons were going to be. You know, was this? We're really going to expand on the whole stories of Shao Kahn and Raiden, and how they at one point they were brothers, and
Yeah.
they were twins. So that's why they wanted me to play it, because eventually it was going to be revealed that we were twins that got separated. And this is all part of this. Yeah, this is all the stuff that we were talking about.
Wow.
Yeah, and they never got into the story, but that's what we were talking about.
So it's funny, kind of funny how the show ended pretty much right before the turn of the millennium, and then, at least from my research, talk of doing another Mortal Kombat anything like kind of went away for a few years, and then I guess it was in
now.
like
I think they just cast another one.
So a new movie is shooting, and it's
Yeah.
supposed to come out next January. But what I was wondering was, through the 2000s, or beyond that, did you ever hear rumblings about the show being revived?
Yeah, I even met with the producer once, and he said he was going to do some other stuff, and he wanted me to play Raiden, but I never heard back from him.
When was that?
Huh?
When was that, like right after the show had ended?
Yeah, it was a couple. I think it was about a year or two after that. I can't remember exactly, but we had gotten together, and he loved my work, and he said that he really wanted to do some more. And they were trying to figure out how they were going to revive the series. That was really a shame too, because I thought that was really going to be a real. I don't know. It just had legs, and I thought it was going to last for a long time. I thought I was going to be living in Florida and for at least 5 to 7 years.
Yeah.
And so did everybody else. Everybody was so relaxed and thought that the show was a hit.
I mean, it's funny you say that, because when you see a lot of those scenes, and just like how like Kristana Loken, Daniel Bernhardt, and
Kristana's a sweetheart too.
Yeah, and Paulo, like, they'll play off of each other. You can just tell
Paulo's a delight. He's just a delightful human being. I just loved him. The cast was just delightful, just lovely.
Yeah, I mean, it seemed like a fun bunch of people, and it's
even
crazy.
everybody that played the heavies and all the guest stars and everything. It was just a romp.
Man,
And so I was really, really disappointed that they couldn't figure out how to make it, make it come together.
Even though I was like 5 when this was filming, you're really making me feel like I missed out on something. Like, I really should have been there.
Yeah, right?
Like, honestly, I haven't even been to Hollywood studios. First time I went to Florida was last September. That was to Fort Walton Beach for my sister's wedding.
Where's Fort Walton?
That's north. That's like the most northwest you can go in Florida.
Oh, so it's on the little panhandle?
Yep.
Ah.
Yeah. It's a nice little area.
It's on the Gulf.
Yeah, it's a nice little beach town.
Oh,
so
cool.
I got nice and crispy for the wedding and wedding photos.
I bet.
Yeah. Coming from I had that Illinois paleness to me yet.
Are you from Chicago?
No, I'm actually from near St. Louis.
Near St. Louis?
Yeah. So I come from a city called Belleville. I guess their claim to fame is the man who played Jed Clampett. He was born there.
I worked with him.
I had a feeling you were going to say that.
Yeah, I did a play called Division Street, and he produced it.
Really?
Yeah, and so his wife directed it. Yeah, you're talking about Buddy Ebsen.
Buddy Ebsen, there we go.
Yeah, Buddy Ebsen. And so I was friends with Buddy Ebsen.
Oh my gosh.
He was quite a dude, man. One time, one of the actors, or two of the actors, broke down on a matinee, and so they didn't make it to the theater on time. Yeah. And so Buddy Ebsen called up one of his friends, because the audience was already there to watch the show.
Right.
He had produced the play that I was doing. And so I was backstage waiting for the other actors to show up, and he got a banjo, and he got his other friend who came out, and they sang and danced for almost an hour and a half, entertaining that crowd before the actors showed up and we did the play.
That is so cool.
That was Buddy Ebsen. I met him in Newport Beach because I was going to Irvine at the time, and his wife was running a local theater there, and I wanted to do something outside of school, and she was doing Division Street, which is a play about Chicago, and it's a comedy, and it was really funny, little sweet little play. And I did it there, and Buddy saw it, and he liked it so much, he said, hell, I'm going to take this to LA. And so he rented out a space, and we went up to the Matrix, and he did, chase lights, and he put up all the money, and that he also entertained when one of the, I guess it was two of the actors didn't make it from Orange County. They broke down on the freeway. And so he entertained the entire crowd for almost an hour and a half, and they loved it. It was Buddy Ebsen.
Right. Well, I guess he had to play the Beverly Hillbillies theme at some point.
I don't know if I don't think he did. No, but he sang a bunch of songs, and he was a great dancer.
That's awesome. He could just put on a show
No,
like that.
he was the original Tin Man in The Wizard of Oz. Did you know that? But he got sick from the silver paint, so he had to quit.
Oh, okay.
And so he was the original Tin Man in The Wizard of Oz. He did all
That
the
is
Shirley Temple.
insane.
And he did the Shirley Temple movies, where Shirley Temple and he had these famous iconic dances together. He was a tap dancer. He was a hoofer. He was an old vaudeville guy.
Did he do the one for Lollipop?
I think so.
Wow. Well, yeah, it sounds like he was definitely full of stories, and I'm sure you learned a lot.
Oh, he was amazing. But he lived on Balboa Island in Newport Beach, and it's an island in the bay of Newport Beach, California.
Mm-hmm.
And I was going to school at Irvine, and so I roomed in a place with my roommate on Balboa Island. And so when I got the part, I would just go over to Buddy Ebsen's house all the time.
Yeah.
And so your hero at home was one of my heroes too.
Wow. And you never knew he was from Belleville, did you?
I knew he's from the Midwest, but I didn't know exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was a big star, man.
I mean,
the Beverly Hillbillies to this day is the highest rated television show in history.
I did not know that.
It had like an 80 share. That's like 80% of all people watching television were watching that show.
Wow.
Yeah, so if you look it up at the Guinness Book of World Records, I think it still stands as the highest rated show in history. And that was Buddy Ebsen.
I'm processing that because I wasn't ready for a bombshell like that.
Isn't that wild? Yeah, he was really cool. He was really nice to me too. He was a nice man. He was old when I met him, though. He was close to 80.
Wow.
So
and have that much energy and vibrance at an advanced age.
He was totally amazing.
Wow.
Yeah, at that point, I think he was wearing hearing aids, but man, oh man, he was. And I grew up watching the Beverly Hillbillies, man.
Isn't it nice to be able to work in a web series or TV format because it seems like you just have more freedom to.
Oh, it's the age of television now, man.
Yeah.
The idea of streaming ideas and binging and everything has changed the story format. Movies are no longer going to be it's not the status anymore. It's open-ended stories are the status. And so know that. You don't have to have an ending to your story. You just have to have a good push.
Yep. And you look at every Star Wars movie and every
any good television. Have you been watching any Ray Donovan or anything like that? You ever watch that show?
No.
Oh, goddamn. It's so good. This is the golden age of television, man. The television on HBO and Showtime and some of these other streaming networks are unfrickin' believably good. The writing is so good too. Because all the playwrights, they went to television.
Yeah. So
all the great writers in American lexicon are in television, man. They're not in films anymore so much. As that the television is exploding because there's more money in it, for one thing.
Well, and it's crazy that
And the
there's more.
artists are in control.
What's that?
And the artists are in control. Is
Yeah.
that HBO changed the model because what was happening with network television, there was too many chiefs, there's too many leaders and not enough followers, and
Mm.
so they homogenized it, and so it became sterile in a way, or creatively. And I think that when HBO came up and started doing their own adult programming, and they gave power to the artist as the work went through the roof. And that's that model of HBO, and they started doing that in the 70s and 80s. And what they did throughout the 90s, they changed television.
Oh, Sopranos was.
Changed it. They
Yeah.
totally changed television. Now Sopranos is it's one big long movie.
Yeah.
And you can do an 8-part movie now. And so you can do Lord of the Rings that changed the whole style of making even franchised movies. Was television did that.
Right.
The luxury of doing for the next 5 years, I'm going to be making one big long movie is a great way for an artist to keep employed.
It's it's definitely got to be fun for a writer to keep coming up with stories. I mean, within reason, and then
Hard. It's hard. That's why the shows don't last more than 7 years. You run out. You run out of story idea.
and even though this isn't really an ongoing it was never an ongoing story, but still, The Simpsons, I feel like, ran out of steam after like season 8 or 9.
What
And
an amazing run, though. What
yeah,
an amazing run.
I mean, it definitely owned the 90s, but I've been a Simpsons fan ever since I was like 8, so it really, and which is weird to say because when I started watching it, I think is when the show started going downhill. But when I go back and after having gone back and watched so much of the 90s show or the 90s episodes, and then it hurts seeing episodes from more recent times because it's just
Right.
like it's night and day of what that show was.
Sure.
And so I definitely see the double-edged sword of doing.
Oh, after a while, I mean, now you can't just keep. I mean, I don't know how you keep writing. How do you keep writing something like that? You'd have to burn out after a while.
Oh, you have to. I mean, same thing with Lost. I mean,
Right. Oh, exactly. So,
yeah.
so do you have any other questions about Mortal Kombat?
Yeah.
Did you ever see my series Raven?
No, I didn't get a chance to watch that
I
one.
think you should take a look at it.
Where
It's
can I-
running. It's running again. It's
Oh.
they're doing it on what's that show, that station called? Is it ITV? It's a news station. They're doing old shows, and I'll think of it. But they also, Sony released a disc version of Raven. They remastered it, and that show's all martial arts.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
The show's about an assassin that gets stuck in Hawaii looking for his kid, and all these assassins come hunting him, and so he's constantly on the, and he's got all these different capers that he does, and it's with Lee Majors, and it's cool. Yeah, it's a cool series. And then the Exile series that I did in Paris is cool too. That's dark. It was supposed to be based on, do you know the book Shibumi?
No.
It's a Trevelyan book about a mystic, and his name was Shibumi. And when I first got the job of doing Raven, is they had told me we're going to do a television version of Shibumi, and I went, sign me up. And so, because this guy was this mystic assassin, and it was a brilliant part. And I just went, okay, yeah. And so I trained my ass off for that. I trained for almost 8 months before I even started shooting. So I was in the best shape of my life. I was a fighter. And so when I did Raven, I was like at the peak of my, I was 30 some years old, and I was in the best shape of my life. And I've been training with Billy Blanks and it was also Howard. Howard's. God, I wish I can remember his name. And he was like a 6-time world champion too. So Howard was part of it. But you can see Raven on. They're streaming it again, and also they have a disc thing. But when I first started doing it, I thought I was doing Shibumi, and then they started saying, we want more Magnum PI. And I went, well, I'm not doing Magnum, I'm doing Shibumi, right? And then
I was gonna say, isn't that kind of heart sinking when you're walking in and you're like, yeah, I'm gonna make this my own
this is
thing.
why the networks failed.
Yeah.
Is because they tried to homogenize too much, man. You got too many MBAs and bean counters trying to create art, and you're going to ruin it. And so that's why television's booming right now, because all these people they need content, and so they're trusting the artists.
Yep.
And so the artists are in more power right now, and so the work gets better. And so all these stories are so much, they're not watered down so much, you know.
So, and I know we're both getting tired, so I'll just ask a couple other questions about Conquest, and
Sure.
then I'll definitely let you go to bed or whatever you need
But I
to
think
do.
you'd get a kick out of Raven if you don't know the series, because
I just looked it up, and there's actually some full episodes on YouTube. So I'm gonna
it's pretty cool.
I'm gonna let Matt know, and that we'll need to check some of these out.
Yeah, good. And if you want to talk about that sometime too, we can. But it's fun. It's only because it's actually it had a really strong following. Yeah, really strong. And after the second season, Walker Texas Ranger came out, and so it was getting big numbers, and so they ended up canceling my show and putting his in there. And my show was 10 times better, in my opinion. It was just more, the production values were better, the writing was better, the fights were better. I was proud of that show. I mean, we worked hard, and we did some pretty interesting stories, and it was fun. But I think you'll get a kick out of it. I think there's some pretty cool shit in that, you know.
Okay. Well, you sold me.
And I don't know what to do with. I don't know if Exile's coming out. I know that CBS still owns it, but I don't know if they're gonna revamp that one either. It's called The Exile.
Was that in 2011?
It was in
91.
91. And that's the show it was a co-French American production. And so it had all these really cool French directors that were doing it. So it has this European quality to it that's really cool. And
definitely not part of the homogenization.
Yeah, it was really cool. It was really different. And, some really, I played a double agent. I was part of the KGB and also the CIA. And then the wall comes down. Yeah, John
Stone and Phillips.
Right. So he was a double agent. So he gets caught by the KGB, and when the wall comes down, and his CIA operative gets shot, so the CIA thinks he's a traitor, and the KGB thinks he's a double agent. So he has to go underground, and he works for this French militia as a ghost, and he's sort of a ghost assassin, and it's really a cool story. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
You definitely have done some interesting shows.
Yeah, I really love that show. In fact, I thought that was a better story than even Raven. But Raven was good, but they botched it because they homogenized it a little too much. I wanted to do Shibumi, and they wanted to do Magnum. That doesn't mix. There's a guy that was raised in Japan and became an assassin. I mean, you got to have Asian people and
yeah, I don't know what it is with Hollywood being so dainty about casting Asian actors.
Yeah, exactly. It's weird. It's weird. It's 21st century now. It should change.
Yeah.
So what else do you want to know about Mortal Kombat?
So just other questions I had. What background did the creative team give you on your characters? or did they have you strictly follow the lore of the video games? Like, did you have to, or did you have to
I
just
didn't
be
get a
free to?
lot. They gave you a Bible kind of
Oh,
idea. So they gave you a book of, what was the history of the whole series, the show, all the fighters. And that was basically it. It was sort of a biography of everybody. But we made up the story as we were doing the Conquest. It wasn't something that they had pre-written. We were writing it as we went along. And some of the stuff would get approved by Mortal Kombat, but we had a writing team that was separate from them that would come up with concepts and ideas, and they would just pass them through the Mortal Kombat people, and they would be approved or not approved.
oh.
I'm pretty sure that's how it worked. And I wasn't part of the writing team, but I had a lot to do with what I was saying. I had some input there, and I love the writer, Steve. I don't know what Steve's doing. I hope he's still with us. I haven't seen him in such a long time, but we used to play golf and hang out together. He was a really good writer too. Yeah, the show had some good people on it.
And a pretty well-rounded list of directors too, like Charles.
Yeah,
Seifert.
right.
Let's see, others that I can't. Oh, Bruce Seth Green.
Yeah. There's also we had Charlie Kanganis.
Yeah. So it seemed like almost every episode had a different director.
Yeah. Well, it's because you have to prep.
Yeah. Right.
You know how it works.
Of course.
And it's a lot of prep on that show because of all the fighting and everything. There was a lot of bells and whistles, and also it's a period piece. You got to put everybody in costume.
Yeah. Was that a real camel? I couldn't tell. That camel that walks by, and maybe I don't know. It's just something random I noticed, but
I think it is.
At first, I thought it was real. At first, it looked real, and I was like, "Oh, that's cool." And then I don't know. Next time I saw it, I thought, "Well, maybe it's like two people in a suit."
No. It was a real camel.
That's awesome. And then, what was your favorite episode, or just storyline?
Well, I think I'd have to say the fight between myself was pretty dynamic and fun. But I also liked. It's been a while, but what was your favorite one?
I personally love the episode with Quan Chi, because I think what Adonis brings to it, like, basically that was an episode that clinched it for me in terms of, okay, like, clearly there's a lot of backstory to be gleaned from this show. Like, honestly, Conquest is the show that has gotten me into Mortal Kombat. Like, I love the two movies, and I really like the Legacy show, but in terms of like actually going out and like researching like who the hell Quan Chi is, and getting the straights on like Kung Lao and Raiden and all them, like, it's crazy just how much. Personally, I think the show does a better job of explaining the mythology better than what the
Oh
two
yeah, absolutely, because you can really tell the story.
Yeah. And Quan Chi was one of those episodes like, okay, now I fully understand like what the difference is between all these villains. You have, he can do certain things that Shang Tsung and Shao Kahn can and can't, and vice versa. So we had talked a lot about just like where the show would have gone, and what could have been and whatnot. If, in keeping with the trend of 90s shows coming back, if Conquest were to be revived in some way, shape, or form, would you be up for playing Raiden and Shao Kahn?
Sure. Absolutely. Why not?
Like, pick up like 20 some odd years later for some reason.
Yeah, why not?
Yeah, I mean, we've been watching this show and we're like it'd be awesome to pick. Like, that's what Matt and I do. We like to come up with different spin-offs of stuff that we watch that, like, we feel like didn't actually get their just follow-up. Or
it might be fun.
What?
To tell a story about like a movie star or a television guy that ends up being the real deal. So, for example, did you ever see Galaxy Quest?
That's on my list. I really want to see that movie.
It's freaking brilliant. I thought it'd be kind of cool that someone who was, doing a part where they had all these extraordinary things happening to them, that it ended up becoming that person was really who they were playing. It's sort of like a Dracula idea, Did you ever heard of the Grand Guignol Theater?
No.
It was a theater that was based on it was like snuff films, but it was reality.
Oh.
All right. So they were really actually, murdering people on stage, and they would fake a guillotine kind of idea with someone. There was blood everywhere, and it was really the turn of the last century was where this stuff was happening. It's called Grand Guignol. You can look it up. And I just thought it would be kind of cool that if there was a character that he made his career out of playing Dracula or a Batman kind of superhero, that he was actually in reality that guy in a different form.
Right.
So his disguise was actually playing the guy.
Right.
And so he actually is that dude. So, for example, if I was playing a character like Raiden, for example, in a television series, and I went home and I was actually this really incredible sort of superhero person that just happened to be in disguise playing Raiden.
Yeah.
But all the gags and everything that he did, he could really actually do.
Like change location.
Yeah. He could disappear. He could, he knew how to vibrationally disappear in a room.
So would you turn this and do a horror story, whether you did it as a TV show or a movie?
Oh, you could do whatever. You could make it a thriller. Did you ever see Unbreakable?
When I was younger.
The M. Night Shyamalan movie?
I was like 8.
Yeah, it's a good movie. Well, it's based on a guy who doesn't know that he's actually a superhero.
Yeah.
Fabulous idea. And Bruce Willis is brilliant in it. He's a very, very good actor, that guy. And I just love that premise. He has to discover his brilliance. And
like the bench press scene where they just keep
marvelous.
It's
marvelous. Little kids. That was perfect. It's just wonderful, wonderful storytelling. And I just thought it'd be a fun character too. That it's sort of like the Superman idea, but in a different form.
Right.
Where he is Superman, but the only way that he can be in disguise is actually he plays the superhero on TV.
Wow.
And he has to tone it down for television. And so he lets them do the gag the way it is, but he can actually do all of it.
That sounds like a fun show.
Yeah. And so he, in his private life, we follow him in his private life, is that he's really he's this, Batman kind of character. And so at night, he actually does get dressed up in a different costume. And he goes out and he's this guy, Avenger.
Yeah.
And then during the day, he's a television actor that is doing action.
Do you think that's something that you'd make in the next couple of years?
Yeah, why not? Yeah, there's another one that I'm doing that is going to be similar to this too. Is that it's about a guy who it's very, very much along the lines of Raven, where he was just designed to be an assassin. He was just born into it.
Yeah.
And so from when he was 4 or 5 years old, he was being trained by people to do really extraordinary things. And it was obvious that he was a savant. He could play chess without looking at the board. He's really sharp and extraordinary. And then he gets brokered into this business of assassination. And so he doesn't know any other life, but he decides that he wants to be in the world, and he starts falling in love with this girl, and so the assassin broker doesn't like it too much. So it becomes kind of incestuous and cool. So it's got Kill Bill kind of qualities to it too.
Well, but it's awesome that you're working on such a wide array of stuff.
Yeah, and so it's I've written a script. It's called The Janitor.
Oh.
And it's about this guy. It's just real simple, and I'm going to make it raw. It's going to be not a lot of bells and whistles. It's going to be blue collar ass kicking.
Blue collar ass kicking.
Yeah.
Make it the tagline.
Right? It's just absolutely raw.
Well, cool.
Yeah, and so I'm working on that too, and I'm casting it, and I'm doing this cop thing, which is about the Mexican cartel and the a border town police department, and they're kind of ill-equipped to deal with this billion-dollar war machine that's coming across the border. And the fentanyl and drug problem is devastating the community, and so I'm writing that too. And so I've been writing a lot, and I have another story that takes place in 1840s, right before the gold rush in California, and it's about a big family that owns this, tremendous chunk of land in Northern California, and he's this evil bastard that is kind of controlling this area. He's sort of dominating, and he's a sadistic bastard that's kind of, torturing his family and imprisoning his own family. And finally his family's had enough, because the church and the law is not intervening to help them. So they take the law into their own hands, and they murder him. It's really an interesting little take on this patricide story.
Of course.
And then, and so I'm doing that, and I've written that. It's called California, and it's kind of a love story, actually, with these two young people, the young daughter of this evil guy and this young monk, this Franciscan monk who's trying to save her life, and the politics and the powers that be in the church and corruption is keeping him from saving her. It's really it's an old story based on a true story called The Cenci, which was written by Percy Bysshe Shelley. Do you know the poet Shelley?
Yeah.
The British poet Shelley.
Yeah.
He wrote Prometheus Unbound and a bunch of other great poetry. He's a very famous English poet. And he was married to Mary Shelley, who wrote Frankenstein.
Okay. I was going to say that last name rang a bell.
Right. And so they used to go, there was actually a movie written about this a while back. I think it was in the 80s, about Lord Byron and Shelley and his wife who would go to like Italy, and they would drink absinthe and get high together, and then they would write these really scary stories and try to freak each other out.
Mm-hmm.
And so she came up and she dreamt Frankenstein.
Yeah.
And he was writing The Cenci, which was based on this real family in Italy about this very powerful landowner who is based on a true story, and that he was raping his daughter, and she ended up, the Pope would not intervene because he was paying off the Pope.
Ouch.
And so she ended up murdering him, and then they tortured and killed the rest of the family and took all of his land. So it was banned in Italy because of its political ramifications. But it's a real story. It's a real story. And so I just transposed it into a story about California, and the lawlessness and the isolation of California in the early 1840s before the real gold rush. And then there was a lot of real Spanish landowners that had immense properties, and they would raise cattle and, you know, farming and stuff, and they'd exploit the, you know, local labor. They were just ruthless, you know, and so there's not a lot of stories done about that too, but it's where I'm from.
Oh,
You know, I was born and raised in Northern California, or born there, and then I was raised in Southern California, so I'm a real California guy. And I don't see very many stories in film and television about old California.
which is weird because that's where
It's
most of the
weird,
actions happen.
right? It's kind of weird that we're doing all this work in this Golden State, and then there's no real, there's no folklore, you know. There's no,
Right.
it's you know, maybe Zorro is the only, you know, sort of Spanish tale of that period that really resonates in filmography. You know, there's not
And
a lot
that's and so you touch on something there with folklore. So my nephew, he's 5, and for Christmas I got him this huge book of folklore from like fairy tales and folklore that dates all the way back to the 16th century. And because I knew that, you know, some of the stories, you know, could be a little bit more hardcore than, you know, your regular fairy tales, like, you know, Hansel and Gretel and all that.
those are great.
It I was reading through some of them, and, you know, just to make sure it was age appropriate, and I was like, this is freaking awesome. I want this book. So that's one of the things I'm going to get actually next for myself, because I
Yeah,
do,
why not? All those stories need to be told again.
yeah.
You know,
Um,
and you can put them in a modern context, or, you know, blend them in some sort of contemporary resonance
for sure.
that,
And
you know, is, you know, because all the stories have been told. It's just your
I've
take on it, right? Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. And so I want to just put my stamp on it, you know.
And what better than some of,
Look what Tarantino's doing. I mean, he's just he's just rehashing old memories and he's a brilliant at it. He's brilliant.
I think it's great when people will celebrate things of the past, but do put their own stamp on it. I think it becomes an issue though when they're just like literally remaking the movie. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like for example, when they did remake of Psycho and they did it frame to frame, why would Gus Van Sant do that?
Yeah. Like,
I don't. He's such a wonderful director. Why would he want to do that?
right. And
It's like paint by numbers. I don't get it.
it's weird how you see so much of that, like, you know, both sides of that spectrum of, you know, like, oh, you know, Quentin Tarantino wanted to pay homage to, you know, this kind of movie with his movie, and then you have a
I love
remake.
how he honors Hollywood in his own relationship to Hollywood. He's really created such a strong voice for himself, and also his sense of joy of filmmaking. I've always thought that was great about Quentin, is that he's got this real palpable sense of joy about movies that
Oh,
I yeah, it's what makes him so fun to watch. Because
and
he's having a ball.
and you can go and watch each of his movies and see exactly what type of movie he's paying homage to throughout the movie.
Right,
So like,
right.
so, you know, Pulp Fiction is, you know, more of a throwback to the noir films of the 50s.
Well, and also all of the pulp comic books. I
Yeah,
mean, all those graphic novel comic books that were coming out during when he was a kid and I was a kid. You know, that's absolutely what that felt like to me. You know, and how it was structured and how it was shot. It was brilliant.
um,
Yeah, it's a real. He's a. I don't know, man. He's such a incredibly. He's so smart about it. I just loved, you know, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I just loved it. It's almost as if he, you know, when you two did Sunday Bloody, what was that? They did Helter Skelter on a tour. They did the song.
mhm.
He said that, and they said that Charles Manson stole the song, and now we're going to steal it back. That was
Mm,
one of the things that Bono said when he was singing it. And I think that that's what Quentin Tarantino did too. He says the Manson family stole that part of my childhood. They ruined it, and he's going to rewrite the story. And so he rewrote the story. It was almost as if that's part of his shadow, some of his fear. And he said, if I could go back, how would I fix that? And isn't that great? It's such what a psychological dream.
It's always nice when you have that level of intention of a filmmaker with
It's
a movie.
wonderful. It's almost as if you shit all over Hollywood, and now I'm gonna fix it. And so it's so cool. He's so cool. He's like the essence of, he understands cool. It's really amazing how Tarantino has shaped his career that way. And he got confident, because he got successful, but like the Hitler thing, the movie about, how great, what a great way to reframe it, making this guy out to be this joke. I loved it. I loved it. You want to punch history in the nose, He said, I'm not gonna let you shape my psychology by that story. I'm going to change the dynamic of that story. That's real power and beauty. It's real beauty, in a lot of ways. Even though his stories are really dark, there's great ebullience and joy in them. That's what I find really fascinating about Quentin's work. Is even in Pulp Fiction, as dark as it was still, there's a little joke in there, right? It's always so nudge, nudge, wink, wink,
For sure, and there's definitely those hidden statements that he's making.
Right,
and it's always
absolutely.
Nice. It's always nice to watch movies like that. I was watching The Seventh Seal for the first time a few months back, and
the original.
Yeah, there was a remake.
Yeah.
Oh,
there wasn't.
Oh, okay. Well, I was watching that Seventh Seal, and it was crazy just how simple the actual plot was. But then all the different conversations that they would have, and just getting that inkling, well, maybe the filmmaker was feeling this type of way when he was making the movie. Maybe he was feeling that type of way. And just based on the conversations that do come up and the things that do happen. I get that with some of the best movies I've seen, and not like all the best movies I've seen, but.
Well, do you go back and look at some of those old classics all the time? Do you?
I mean, not all the time.
What compelled you to see The Seventh Seal?
I was really interested in just watching more meditative movies about, that would just basically just slower moving movies that were set in farther back times and were made, at least a few decades ago, because I just wanted to get a different pace of a movie from, things that were made like post 1970.
It's a totally different sensibility.
Yeah. I mean, that was definitely one good thing about taking a film appreciation classes, like at a modern world cinema class. So you'd get introduced to people like Fellini, directors from India. So watching a Bollywood movies was very fascinating.
Completely different way of looking at entertainment. We're pretty sophisticated now too, Richie. When you're looking at your audience now, is that you realize that your audience is seeing so much more television and film than any other time in history. Is because we can watch it so readily available, right? It wasn't like back in, 50 years ago, 40 years ago, you had to go to the movie theater. If you wanted to see The Wizard of Oz, you waited once a year. You didn't have a way that you could see it over and over again, right? We didn't have the kind of scrutiny that we do now. When you think about someone like, let's say, one of the great actors of all time was, someone like a great stage actor. Like, well, let's see, Edwin Booth. You know, if somebody, you know, one of the Booth, you know, his brother ended up, John Wilkes Booth ended up killing the president. But Edwin Booth was considered one of the great Shakespearean actors in the world, and he was an American. He was very famous, right? Or if you saw someone like Sarah Bernhardt, who played Hamlet with one leg, and she was a female. She was world famous as an actor back in the turn of the century, last century. She maybe saw, maybe, I don't know, her whole career, maybe hard pressed that a million people saw her. Hard pressed. I was doing a soap opera, a little teeny little soap opera, half-hour soap opera in New York, and I asked him what the numbers were, and the producer said, "You're being seen by like 3 or 4 million people a day." And then I tried to wrap my head around that. A day? Sarah Bernhardt, one of the greatest actors of the last century, never even saw 100. I would say hard pressed to see 1 million people in a career. Think about that. And so the audience is so bloody sophisticated now. The work has to be so good. And so when you're looking at, everybody's an expert for acting. They don't know how to do it, but they know the difference between what's good and what's bad because they're so sophisticated. When an audience first saw a film, the first film that they saw was a train coming into a station. Everybody ran. Thought the train was coming in the room. When they did Frankenstein for the first time, when Frankenstein came out, people were fainting in the theater. They were screaming and running from the theater when Boris Karloff turned around.
Wow.
And so they had to put a trailer or a teaser in the beginning of that movie. I don't know if you've seen the movie recently.
It's been a few years, but
well, they have a guy. He comes through a curtain. It's on film. He comes through a curtain. He goes, "If you're really scared and you're this and that," and he says, "you should leave the theater because what you're about to see is terrifying." And so they had to do this as a precursor to the movie to warn people that they're going to be freaked out. And now we look at it and it looks ridiculous. And so you're dealing with the sophistication of the 21st century audience is absolutely ridiculous. When you think of trying to, create something that's supposed to be an illusion, everybody's a master of the illusion.
I agree with that to some extent. I feel like while we have become more sophisticated in detecting like, oh well, this is such a primitive storyline, or
the acting's not very good,
or I could totally tell that was a fake King Kong, whatever, but really, I see what you mean in terms of like what I was saying about like certain movies and that it was too simplistic. I was just saying that with that particular movie, it didn't make sense.
I wasn't even referring to your point of view. I was referring to just it's an odd time that we're so saturated with material, that it becomes, of that period, it was something new.
Yeah.
And now it's just something cliche, or it's something, rudimentary, or it's not terribly, it doesn't feel sophisticated because of the simplicity of it. But back then it was experimental. It was something quite, unique, which created a sort of new thread of what filmmaking was.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so it's when you look back at some of the movies that they consider to be good, even stuff in my own lifetime, I go back and I look at something like, 2001: A Space Odyssey. So I go, well, it just kind of lays there in a lot of ways for me. And as brilliant as it is, it's sort of, come on, get on with it, because I've been inundated with so much shredding of story. It's just but he was painting this on this large canvas, and he was trying to create a particular kind of atmosphere of something that was very new, which was space exploration.
Right.
And so now we're inundated with it, so it doesn't have the same sort of resonance.
It just seemed more interesting to me at the time to go back and, watch movies from just very different points of view.
I think that's really smart too, and it's also it triggers a vocabulary for you that I think, relying on. I think a lot of times we get caught up in what is contemporary rather than seeing where something comes from, and so it's coming from something, and so to be a historian of the work is really valuable, I think. I think that's why Scorsese is such a great filmmaker, is because he's also standing on the shoulders of giants. He really understands the history of filmmaking.
And and it's funny you say that too, because I know I say that a lot. It's funny you say that, but I was just watching a scene the other day from The Irishman. It shows Joe Pesci and Robert De Niro when they're old, and they're in prison. And Joe Pesci's teeth are just so ate up that he has to literally dip his bread into grape juice to be able to chew it. And even then, it's just like,
I love it,
the slowest chew. And what I love is, like, it's crazy how Scorsese translated that in his film language, because you see that in the medium shot, like, okay, they're eating, whatever. And then you're thinking, oh, dang, these guys are old, because it's like they do this with the bread. Like, maybe they have to do that with the bread. And then Scorsese's like, yes, they do have to do that with the bread. Look at this close-up. And, like, sure enough, they're dipping it in their grape juice. And it looks disgusting.
Really, right?
And what I was saying earlier about movies like Halloween as part of, this essay, it's like, oh, here's a shot where the sentence is, yes, this is what they've been reduced to. This is how they're paying for their sins before they inevitably die.
Right.
And so what I was going to say too is
it's just good storytelling,
Yeah.
How to be able to tell it with an image.
Yeah, and it totally makes sense that he was able to he knew how to show it with an image, because I can see how he would go back and watch a lot of those older movies, and obviously grew up with those older movies from all those different, and a lot of different foreign filmmakers too, because a lot of them were so visually based. And it just puts me in a completely different vibe when I'm watching something from anywhere from the 30s through, honestly, even the 60s, like with something like In the Heat of the Night. I can almost turn off the audio, and I feel like the story's being told to me through visuals.
It's really interesting too. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, one of my favorite ideas based on this is when I was watching the Wild Bunch, and it's the opening shot is that they're riding into town, and they have Peckinpah has this shot from above. And they're riding in, and then the shot drops down, and it's got these children, and they're playing in the dirt.
Mm-hmm.
And the children have got these matches lit around a scorpion. And it tells the whole story in one inciting image. In the beginning of the movie, that's in folklore has it. I don't know if it's true, but if you put fire around a scorpion, it will sting itself to death.
Really?
And so that's kind of what happens in the entire movie to the protagonists. It's fascinating image. But I just think that's just really good filmmaking, to be able to, how do I encapsulate my story in several images and project that as sort of and it's so subtle in the film that you don't quite get it, unless you really break it down. It's, that somebody wrote that, and somebody was thinking that's my encompassing image of the entire movie, is I'm foreshadowing the entire movie by one image of children playing with matches and a scorpion. It's just fascinating, but that's just good storytelling. You know,
Exactly.
it's a film.
I,
It's got to be with the image.
the other thing that I started doing too is going back and reading just more, I guess, sort of contemporary novels, but reading things like Frankenstein, and I recently got done reading The Jungle, and one of the similar to how I really like the mindset that older movies will put me in terms of, oh, these were simpler times. This was simpler ways of storytelling, but I think in some ways better than more modern. Um, Now, if you take a look at my top 10 favorite movies, you'd never guess that because most of them are from the 80s. But anyway,
It was a good era.
um,
It was a good
it
era
was
of
it was
filmmaking.
a great era. I just got done watching Predator before we started talking.
Brilliant.
Um,
Fantastic script too, by the way.
See, in Predator and it's
It's the
like
best
Die
movie
Hard.
that Schwarzenegger ever made was Predator, I think, in my opinion. That and Terminator 2.
I was gonna say Terminator 2 is the best, then T1, then Predator.
Yeah, Robert Patrick's a good friend of mine.
Really?
Yeah, yeah, I've known him for a long time. I knew him a long time before he became successful. But
Wow.
yeah, lovely guy.
I heard that he was such a fast runner that he was actually catching up to John Connor on the bike, so they told him to slow down.
I don't doubt it. Yeah,
That's
well, he was young then. You know, he's my age now, or he was then too. But he's yeah, he got lucky. He got in that show. First of all, I think right before he did that, he did
he was
Die
in Die.
Hard 3. Yeah, he
Uh,
played one of the bad guys in Die Hard.
yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, and he
The
had
one
a
in
little
the
moment,
airport.
and I think that Cameron liked him, and but you know, but he's a good actor. He's had quite a career. Um, yeah, so Terminator 2, I think, in my opinion, is probably one of the great action scripts of all time, in my opinion. It's pretty
It's
flawless.
it's one of those scripts that I literally would read. I started reading scripts online when I was like 9, and
It's a good way to
so
know movies.
oh yeah,
I
so
did the same thing.
basically going through that script, it's like holy crap.
Yeah, it's
Like
perfect.
this is detailed action.
It's
It's like
perfect.
140 pages plus of it.
Yeah, it's
And
absolutely flawless, in my opinion. It's just one of the great Hollywood movies ever written,
I
let
mean,
alone action. It's just it's flawless.
I feel like
There's
that
not a
was
there's not a bad frame in that movie.
no. And that's another movie where and that's actually my favorite movie of all time. And
I
it's
don't
an
blame you. It's one of mine. It's one of my top of action. That's
yeah,
the greatest action movie ever made, in my opinion.
well said. Yeah, it's another great example, I feel like, of one of those movies that really has something to say. And so, like you said, not a frame is wasted on making its
No,
statement.
it's really yeah, it's good, great storytelling. Great
Um,
storytelling. That's a great Hollywood movie.
oh yeah.
It's not
Uh,
good. It's great.
I feel
It's what
like
made Cameron a real star, in my opinion, is that movie. Because he
it's
had done
worth
yeah, he had done others, and you know that, but T2, unbeatable.
no. Yeah, I don't think he's ever come close.
Not even close. And he's made some great movies,
Yeah.
but Terminator 2 is the editing in Terminator 2 is flawless.
Oh yeah.
It's spectacular.
I mean,
And some of the
and
gags in it too are just ridiculous.
oh, I mean, the way that they did the T-1000 with his head getting blown in half, I loved. So I always thought that all of that was CGI, but I
No, it was a
loved
real
when,
costume.
yeah, that was insane. Like I
Yeah,
saw
yeah.
behind the scenes video of that, and I love just how much they had married the CGI with the special
Yeah.
effects to where
It's
like
beautifully done.
beautifully done.
Yeah,
And they
I'm
did
with
it in
you.
such a they did in such a short amount of time too.
Yeah, what if it just, it sets the bar, is if you're going to make a movie like that, an action movie like that, it's got to be of substance, and it's got to have that kind of drive to it, and it's got to have that kind of music and that kind of framing and that kind of editing. And I mean, in my opinion, it's one of the great movies of all time. No doubt about it. I also think that Chinatown's a great movie. Have you ever seen Chinatown?
Yeah.
One of the great scripts of all time, too. That script is freaking flawless. There's not a bad word. There's not one mistake in that thing. It's just brilliant. What a great movie.
That's one of your favorites, you said?
Oh, Robert Towne, man. That's absolutely brilliant movie. Let's see, what else? On the Waterfront is one of my favorites.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I love that movie.
It's really well. Kazan, is, in my opinion, is probably one of the greatest acting directors, because his performances in that movie you can't get better acting than that.
No. I mean, a lot of people say it, but because it is true, but the contender scene, it's like that. It's
Brando is a genius.
I think we've pretty well covered Kombat among many other things. I mean this in a really good way. It was good talking to you. I mean this in a really good way. I had no idea it would run this long, but
Yeah, me neither. But we just got chatting about stuff that we both admire and love. So, but yeah, it was great meeting you, Richie. And good luck with everything. Good luck with the podcast, and good luck with your projects too.
Thank you,
and keep in touch. If you ever want to, chat some more or anything, just let me know. There'll be something else to talk about eventually, I think. But we covered everything else. We sort of saved the world, didn't we?
I think we saved the world, and we created new problems in the process, just to make sure it wasn't boring, so that we can save it again on the next podcast.
There you go. Well, man, be well.
Yeah, you too.
Sayonara. Take it easy.
You too, absolutely. Yeah, we'll be in touch. I'll let you know how things are going with this Batman movie. I'll send you the link to it on.
Yeah, please keep me up to date on your projects and everything, and also when the podcast comes out and how you guys are doing with that. And good luck with all your projects, man.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right, man. Take care.
You too.
Cheers. Good night.
Cheers. Good night.
Well, that's a wrap for Jeff Meek. And once again, how was that for you?
2.5 hours talking to this man. I learned a lot about, actually, real talk, I learned a lot about the real work that you have to put in as an actor. And from him detailing the 20 plus years that he put into the theater business, the TV business, before he got to Conquest, it was eye-opening to just see how much you have to pour into your craft.
Yeah, the show is a lot about not just us talking to the people who are in the industry, but also relating to them in how hard the struggle is, even in the indie side and also in the Hollywood side of it.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think people who are just watching this, whether just fans of movies, fans of TV, or want to be in it, it's great knowledge to actually know about all this stuff. And also just let's be honest, how fucking cool Jeff Meek is.
Jeff Meek is the coolest, and I wish you could have saw our reaction when he emailed us back the first time and said, yeah, sure, I'll do it. Like, what were you doing? We were, jumping around the floor, just shouting, Jeff Meek!
It might have been, in Rocky 3, where Stallone and Creed are jumping around in the water with short shorts. We weren't wearing the short shorts, but there was water.
And a lot of yelling.
And make sure you watch Mortal Kombat Conquest, because it is one of a kind. It is just beyond, I guess, comprehension. It's hard to describe. And you can tell how much fun they are having on set.
And it was, 26 episodes?
26 beautiful episodes.
Each one counts. Make sure you get it. It's only, $20 on Amazon?
I think so.
Or you don't have to go to Amazon. You can get it anywhere. $20. Watch it.
So tune in March 26th, where we both, this is the first time both Matt and Richie will be talking together with Adani Meropis, who played Quan Chi on Mortal Kombat Conquest. This guy is one of a kind. But this is Action Gems, where we find them, you watch them. See ya.